Thank you for joining us today. I'm super excited to welcome back to the Digital Campfire director, writer, and animator, Jerry Rees. What are we going to be talking about today, Jerry?
Well, we're going to be talking about immersive emotions, and I would invite everyone to turn their cameras on.
Okay.
So that I can see faces, which gives me much more of an immersive emotional bonding moment with all of you. Now, last time we were talking about the eccentricity of the individual, and Christine had a wonderful story about a moment of eccentricity she saw, and she's actually doing a sketch of somebody that came in to check for critters in her residence, and was holding up a stuffed animal to check to see if it had anything crawling on it by the tail. And I thought that was, she just really noticed it as an eccentric little moment. I thought that was awesome. Anyone else have things they would like to talk about that they observed before we get into immersive emotions? To talk about if you watched off camera or just your neighbors or families or friends, and you noticed the eccentricity of the individual that made you notice and think you might use it in your work going forward. I would open up to all of you. Eugene, it looks like you're raising your hand.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I watched a couple. I gotta look at the names again. Constance Wu and Lance Reddick. Those were two interviews I watched this morning. I was looking at body language at first, and what Constance was doing with her hands. And there was one point, and she was in the beginning, she was kind of these closed gestures. I looked at how her head kind of stayed in the same place, but she would either move her head from side to side or nod. And I watched her eyes. But then when she got to the point in the interview when she was talking about observing other actors in class, and something she's really passionate about, she leans forward and she just starts doing this, really getting in the expression. And her whole, everything changed about her body language. So that was one example of where it was just.
So obviously sort of self-conscious before that moment, and then just stop thinking about how you're presenting and just getting involved with something else you love.
Little by a little, opening up more, relaxing more. I was also looking at Sam Jones's, is that his name? The interviewer?
Yeah, Sam Jones.
Yeah, his body language. Sometimes we kind of mirror what other people are doing. His body language didn't change that much throughout the interview, but yeah, eventually they kind of mirrored each other, and then she kind of closed up a little bit and opened up, and yeah, it was good.
I notice he does a thing often where he presents one idea and another idea and then sort of groups them. They'll say, you did this and you did this, and how would you feel if they, so I just noticed that as a recurring gestural thing from him.
Yeah.
What else did you notice?
With Lance Reddick, I have notes everywhere, and now I can't focus on how Lance ended his sentences. There was beats, like everything would end with this emphasis on the last word in the sentence.
Right.
His body language was different, much more kind of leaning back into the seat. I try to get an idea of how the chairs themselves were oriented. I think sometimes that'll influence how people, how comfortable they are. So they're kind of faced slightly toward each other, but it was just different. And there were similarities, between him and Constance at different points. So yeah, I definitely want to do a rewatch and just start paying more attention to these things, because I know they're important to kind of catalog. Yeah, as an artist.
Yeah, it's as we notice things that catch our eye, that stand out, and it's great that you're making those observations. Those will generally come to you as you're thinking about bringing a character to life. But then particular moments, will stand out. So you generally will be aware, but then have a specificity to hit a unique, one-of-a-kind individual. And then it gets you thinking in a way where you might invent your own for a character, but you have sort of representative examples of the kinds of things that grabbed your attention before, and you go, what's a new one I could throw to this character that people haven't seen before? It's like the the player in the Olympics that licked only his left pinky before he did the free throw shot. It's like, you might have invent something like that for a character that people would really, really notice. It's just in a sea of needing to produce on a schedule where we, whether it's our own work we have to finish eventually, or whether it's for a company and we're staying on a schedule, the sort of rush to meet deadlines often sends us to generic solutions, things that we've done repeatedly, and we go, I've done this for 30 characters, I'll do it for character 31 as well, and it works. At least they look different. It's a different design, and so same gesture but different looking character. And gosh, I remember there was a moment years ago where my wife and I had moved to Marin County, and we came back down to LA to surprise people at Halloween. And Tim Burton let us use his Pasadena office as our hideaway and didn't tell anybody we were coming. And so we dressed up in costumes that were so covering that we thought no one will even recognize us. Let's see how long it takes for people to figure out who we are. And so I had a complete face mask and a jumpsuit, and my wife also had a complete covering. I was there for a while, and Harry Sabin, a good friend, just walked up and went, "Jerry, I know it's you." And it was just, it didn't matter. The exterior was different, but the body language, he just saw it and he knew that it was me under there. And, we have to remember that with our characters, that we think just a new character design refreshes it. And you're like, oh, the character model is different, so I'll use my same gesture palette, but it looks different because now it's a rabbit, or now it's a fox, or now it's a person. And, but we have to remember that people still feel that uncanny sameness. They recognize the character you did before, unless you make something inherently new happen with the behavior underneath of it. So don't just rely on a new character design to make it new. So anything else, or
I'll start one more quick thing. I noticed that Lance's pants were tight. He was wearing those kind of slim fitting, kind of skinny jeans.
Right.
The tight, I could tell that some of the gestures just had to do with trying to get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
He's really, they're like tights, and you could tell.
It's like squirmy.
And down and everything. I was like, oh, it is, but it's not this we all do to something. You get an itch or something, you're adjusting something, or the collar is bothering you. But
somebody that really surprised me was I think it was Will Forte, who's very animated in his comedy, but he just sat there. He looked like the Lincoln sculpture. He just for a lot of the interview, he just was like, I just am laying here completely limp thing, have my arms on both sides of the chair and my legs just akimbo, and he just would talk like this. And I was like, when are you going to move? It's like, well, when I'm doing comedy. That surprised me. Anybody else have things, or Eugene, if you had any more things to add? Okay, anyone else? Yeah, Landon.
Well, I did try the exercise myself. I did make the mistake of doing it a little too close to the deadline, I guess. But I did manage to find a couple, Martin Short and Jackson Brown. It was definitely different comparing a comedian with a songwriter, like comparing apples and oranges, but they were definitely very different things. Like I chose Martin Short because he always seemed like a very eccentric kind of person. And that definitely showed in his interview, like where his face kind of gets a little wide-eyed, it gets very expressive.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of does some imitations of like some of his characters.
Yes, he has quite a variety of characters. I've had the pleasure of directing him twice, and it's great. He brings it to the table from the moment he drives in. He's like, drives in and the car like skids to a stop and he leaps out and hello. It's like everybody in the movie set. It's like he's ready to entertain them and make them feel great today. And so he seems to be always on. I never saw him not on.
Yeah, yeah, even when he was in a more restrained more restrained situation, like sitting down interviewing Sam Jones,
Mhm.
he still let some of that eccentricity shine, because yeah, Jackson Browne was a bit more restrained, considering he was a songwriter and all, but
Mhm.
but Martin Short definitely definitely had that spark of life to him, that, like, as I mentioned, with the face and sometimes with the gestures and the voices. Sometimes he did a few voices.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that about Jackson Browne. I haven't seen that particular interview, but when I listen to his music, I also feel somebody that's more, it's less sort of effusive in the music. You know, some people you listen to and there's a passion. It seems more like he's doing a studied statement in his music to my ear. And so what you're describing about his behavior during the interview, to me, kind of matches what my ear does with his music. That it's less exuberant and more a statement.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, anybody else have observations they made before I jump into today's?
I can share one
discussion?
thing. It
Yes.
doesn't have to do with the interview, but you know, it's all around you, right? I had
Yeah.
a service
Oh, yeah.
provider come by and I was talking to them, and I noticed they're kind of quiet anyway, but I noticed that every time they spoke, they turned their head away from me.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
like they looked out over the landscape
Right?
and just was talking, and then they'd come back.
Interesting.
That's part of their personality. Maybe they're shy. Someone else is raising their hand. Zachary.
Sure. Yeah, Zach.
I just wanted to throw out there other good interviewers that you can do the same thing with, is the Howard Stern interviews. You can see videos of them doing the interview now, and then also the show Hot Ones. That the interviewer Sean Evans, he's really good at like pulling people's like essence out of them so that they look
Cool.
like a caricature of themselves almost. Like
I'm-
more like themselves than they
I'm
usually
so
do.
glad that Howard has the cameras now where you can watch, because you know he would
Yeah.
dig in a way that when he used to be on the local radio, I would really look forward to interviews, because I
Mhm.
knew that people were going to explore a lot more things and past just the novelty and the sort of edge that,
No,
that he does. He would
he's
get
def-
substance out of them. Thought that was very interesting. And Hot Ones is the other one.
Yeah, Hot Ones with Sean
Mhm.
Evans. It's kind of gimmicky with like Hot Wings, but what happens is the people let their guards down.
Yeah,
It's almost
okay.
like they're intoxicated or something, because
Is that the one where they do more and more hot peppers
Yeah.
as they go?
Yes, that's right.
Yes,
but it's actually the
yes,
interview.
my
the interview
sons are into that.
yeah, the interview content is actually pretty good on some of them. And several
As the
guests
smoke starts to come out of their
Yeah.
ears and flames.
Yeah, yeah,
Flames
yeah. The
on
guests
side of
are
John's
always
face.
like remarking on the questions being really
On the side of
thoughtful.
his face.
Right. Cool. Well, if anyone else has something to add, we will dwell on this. If not, I will dive into the next topic. So what do you guys think? You ready to go? All right, so we will start. We're ready for the part 2, immersive emotions. And, you know, I not only desire to sort of advocate for building emotion in immersive space, I think it's our natural tendency to just go there and do that. So to explore that, I will go back to one of the things I mentioned when I went through the section about you don't win the next technology phase with better technology, you win the next technology phase with better philosophy. And one of the last ones I hit was reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence becoming blended reality now, where immersion equals companionship. And I just think the natural gravity of what we're building makes that so, although it's up to us to advocate to make it more powerful as it does that. And to explore that today, just a heads up, I will be exploring some lessons I've learned from Dubai lessons from Willy, lessons from the barbershop, lessons from the battlefield, and that I might see some, to hold your hand, Tina, to get through that one. That's a little tough. Lessons from Madame Mediocre and her tarantula assistant, Fernando. And I have Fernando here today. And lessons from M.I.T. So let's dive in. Lessons from Dubai. I was out there, gosh, 2007. I made a trip to Dubai. Alison Savich, who's was chairperson for New Media for the Producers Guild at the time, got in touch with me, and she said, you know, Sheikh Mohammed is looking for new city concepts, and she and I had been used to dabbling around with the potentials of new technology. In her position, she would get people knocking on her door to give technology to people like James Cameron in the industry and try to get it in film. She would invariably call me and spend you know, about a week brainstorming between the two of us, like, gee, what can we do with this technology? And then eventually she'd, of course, give it to Cameron or whoever, but we would have some time to just think. So, you know, as part of that ritual, she called me and said, hey, you know, the new city design, what do you think? Some of these ideas that we've been toying around with next generation avatars and communication and game space used for real purposes and having it grow up here. Like, what do you think? Is there a city to be found? So I actually put together a deck called Infinity City. And the idea is it would be the first city built physically and virtually at the same time with maximum interfaces built in. Instead of retrofitting, it would be like good design from the beginning. And the name Infinity City, because you could have an infinite population, you have the physical population there, and then as people interface with people that are projected or virtually appear there to them, or with augmentation, you could keep adding more and more population that really has addresses and does socialize and do business in that city. So Infinity City. Anyway, so about 30 hours later, there was a deck put together and we submitted it, and we actually got invited. We had 8 days in the 3 of the Emirates, and at the invitation of the Sheikh, and presented the idea for this new city that would change how the world works. It was the Billionaires Club, and you know, sadly, we didn't get investment to, you know, really work on the infrastructure globally to get broadband where it needed to be. This was 2007, mind you. But we did get a lot of interest, and a lot of them just wanted tricks for their offices so they could bring people in and do something amazing. And of course, we wanted more than that. We wanted to really, really make this place. But during my presentation, I saw a woman watching from the back, and later we had a gathering at someone's apartment, and she came up to me and she said, now, wait a minute, you're telling me that this entire wall behind me could be media if I wanted it to be? And I said, yes. She went, I don't want my kids coming home and playing a 10-foot video game. Like, boom, done. She did not want this technology. So I said, well, okay, let's say that you're home about a half hour before the kids, they're still at school, and you have a little bit of time to yourself. And 100 miles away, your mom, who you haven't seen for a month, is in her apartment. She has a little time. And you make a cup of tea and you pull it up next to your wall. She makes a cup of tea and she pulls her chair up next to her wall. And the two of you just see each other life size, and you forget there's even a wall there. And you talk. And she got tears in her eyes and she said, I would love that. And it's just, you know, it goes back to that idea that when we use the same tools for purposes of connection and emotion, people have a more powerful connection to it. And I think that's, in general, people think of technology as this, you know, this territory of things. But when technology becomes the territory of people and emotions and connection and sharing, it's a whole different thing to them. So that was something that was very instructive that I learned from Dubai. And I've, you know, that personal connection is something that that I've felt before that moment and continue to see popping up here and there after that moment. Lessons from Willy. This was a very interesting situation where I was being sent up to, it was the Lucas Ranch, and Disney sent me up, I think this was 2015, and it was going to be about all things immersive. So it was like top people from all over the world having to do with that. And it was 2 days of discussion. Well, I had a driver, Willy, taking me there, and he had just picked me up from the airport, and I didn't talk to him about that I was part of this discussion or panels or anything. I just started shooting the breeze with him and found out a bit more about him. He said that he and his wife had a fledgling film company that they were putting together, trying to inspire inner city kids that they could really make something of their lives if they have a drive, and anything is possible. And so I asked him about just use of new tools, and he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm using FaceTime because I have this driving job and I'm away from my wife and daughter for 5 days a week at minimum, sometimes 6. And so now I'm using that tool for sure. And I asked him, well, what do you think about VR? And he immediately went to this story. He just said, well, okay, I don't want you to think I'm weird talking to dead people, but my grandmother used to give me the best pep talk. And he said, if I could sit on the couch with her, not see a video, if I could sit with her and have her look me in the eye again and say, Willy, you can be anything you want to be. Just stick to it, kid. He said, oh, man, that would mean the world to me. So I just thought it was so interesting. Here's somebody who is maybe approaching 30 years old and who was getting into using film tools. And to him, VR meant reliving a moment with grandma that was inspirational. And I just went, wow, that reminds me of the Dubai moment. Then he went to a second moment that kind of floored me, because I had drawn that exact thing that he described a week earlier back at my Disney office. He said, imagine you're with the military and you have a little time to get away, but not all the way home. So you step into a volume and you could be in your living room and be with the rest of your family, your toddler, your spouse. And I had drawn that exact thing as a use case. And I didn't tell him that, but it was just so wonderful to see, him thinking of these very connected family issues. And so to him, like reuniting with family members and reconnecting other people with their family members was the main value to immersive tools. Lessons from the barber shop. Okay, this happened a few hours after that. I was then at the seminar at Lucas, and they had people from all different universities, and Magic Leap was there, and Google was there, and the main person dealing with VR for Google got up and gave a presentation, and near the end of his, he talked about a few things. I forget whether it was listed 5 or 7 things that he thought were the reasons it should exist, VR in period. And I remember he started with democratize the world, the experience of the earth for human beings, that we should all be able to explore the wonders of the earth that we live on and go to the most remote places with virtual tools, and to make those more ubiquitous and useful to people. And not just saying like either the explorer who has a lot of expertise, or the millionaire or billionaire who can have other people have expertise, take him or her there. But just say anybody on the earth should be able to go to any corner of the earth and just stand on the mountain, be in the jungle, whatever, and stand anywhere on our earth that they want to and experience it. But then his last one, it was kind of a similar lead in that Willy had done, where he goes, okay, you're probably going to think I'm weird. And I went, oh, okay, now I'm interested. And he said, I know this barber, and I've been going there to get my haircut for years, and he's a good friend, and he tells great stories. And over the years, I look forward to my haircut because it's so much about just the friendship. And he's retiring now. And I'm never going to get that haircut. So he goes, I'm doing a volumetric capture of my last haircut from my favorite barber and friend. So again, like his final cherry on top example was that. And which reminds me, also I went to a seminar on behalf of Allison Savich about AR, and there was this whole panel for a few hours. And at the very end of it, and like in the last 30 seconds, someone on the panel said, but you know what? It's like the most powerful AR that I could have is you sitting next to me so we can experience the sunset together. And everybody in the room goes, yeah. And I thought, well, why didn't you start this discussion with that? But when people finally confess, like, you know, it's really special, they typically get to that shared human moment. So let me go back to my deck here. This one, lessons from the battlefield, but a different kind of battlefield than Willy was describing. I was at USC doing a talk. It was called The Evolution of the Game Grid from Tron to Esports. So I was there representing, because I was a computer graphics choreographer on the first Tron many years ago. And Mike Bonifer, who put this together, just went, wow, it's like, you know, you and your team members were building the imagined future of a game grid and people playing inside of the game grid. And now esports is a thing, and there's millions of dollars at stake. And Susie Kim on the left was general manager for the London Spitfire, which was a Overwatch League team with Blizzard. And they're people in their teens and millions of dollars at stake. And so she was there representing that. And Arash Markazi, who's a sports commentator, is there in the center, and he was dealing a lot with esports commenting. And so we were on this panel. And there she is with some of her cohorts. So she told us a story about the connection in immersive space. She was talking about a young person who had gotten involved with World of Warcraft. Certainly in my house, World of Warcraft was very present in the early days when the internet was, you know, straining to keep up with the massive missions going on. But this young person had gotten really obsessed with it and was spending a lot of hours in there getting to know other people. Now, his parents thought that, you know, he had sort of a hard time making friends physically in real life, and they would see him go to his room and look at the screen and put the headphones on, and they didn't realize that he was out on missions with people who got to know him and were connecting with him and depended on him and would look forward to him coming back. So there was this huge social thing, which he was a part of, not just anonymously, but they knew him and were looking forward to him and could depend on him to support certain parts of the mission. Well, sadly, he died. And she told a wonderful thing that happened, very heartfelt thing that happened. His father saw the account sitting there open and just typed in, like, for anybody trying to reach him, because messages were coming in. For anybody trying to reach him, you know, I'm sorry to say that our son passed away. And suddenly there was an outpouring of messages to the parents, and people from all over the world flew to this guy's hometown and attended his funeral. It was just amazing. So the parents had no idea that he did have friends, genuine friends, that would bother to get on a plane and fly and attend his funeral by virtue of getting to know them and having activities together. Yes, some of them fantasy, but some of them real friendship aspects in this immersive space. And I just thought that was an extraordinary thing. Now, Susie told another part of it, that there was a dual thing. There was the physical event in the hometown, which was very sweet. They also had a wake for him in the World of Warcraft universe. So people with avatars gathered. Now, the team that normally was versus them came and massacred everybody. So, you know, it was a good chess move. It was very disrespectful, but thankfully that was only in the virtual world. So, you know, kudos to them for good chess move if they're being ruthless. But the point was, they were everybody was up to taking that risk in memory of him and connection with him. So I just thought that was really, really an amazing story. So next up, lessons from Madame Mediocre and her tarantula assistant, Fernando. And I would just let you see meet Fernando. I actually have Fernando here. Fernando is the tarantula assistant. This is Fernando, and he's feeling a little feisty today. Actually, he's very cheap little. It's one of these little squeeze ball things that runs him. But my wife Rebecca had gone to a party, and it's something that she just started when friends were having a party, and it was all at the time adults and a late evening party, and there was alcohol being served and stuff. So she went, you know what, I'm gonna put on some of my stuff from the Renaissance Fair, and I'm gonna make up a character, Madame Mediocre. I'm gonna put up a sign, your fortune told, and she made no bones about this being an absolute joke. But she came home that night and she went, oh my goodness, the craziest thing happened. Partway through the evening, people would sit down and ask me serious things quietly about their lives. They would wonder about their careers going forward and who they might have a relationship with if they didn't have someone yet, or whether a relationship they were in was going to last. It got very serious. And so she said, that was freaky. I don't know, maybe it was the alcohol. So then, a few years go by, and at the school where our kids are going, attending, they have a Halloween party, and they go, hey, any parents want to participate? So she goes, okay, I'll be Madame Mediocre again. And you know what, this is all kids and it's just gonna be fun, so no sweat. So she gets dressed up, she goes, they set up twinkly lights around, and they put her sort of in a climb up treehouse thing that was part of their playground. And she starts having fun in the evening. I'm doing other activities. I meet up with her later in the evening when they're closing up, and she was like the last thing to close. Its kids were lining up. So she comes out and she was absolutely exhausted, and she went, oh my God, it happened again. Over half the kids were asking serious stuff. It's like, my parents don't love me anymore, or I'm having problems with my homework, or my grandma's in the hospital, stuff like that. And it just, she said, I can't believe it. I'm a fictitious character. I make no bones about it. I'm pretend. I'm here to have fun. And yet it goes to these serious places where they need help. It's like a therapy session. And then she did it a second year and was like, well, maybe it's a fluke. It happened the third year. It's like, so at the first party and both school years, same thing. So one thing that we really learned out of that was that when you make companion characters in AI, they will deal with important things. You can't skip that. I had a good friend who wrote for Sarah Wolfick. She wrote for M.I.T project, and they were doing a talking character. I believe it was Barbie. But she described in one of the test moments that a child talked about their grandmother dying, and she desperately wanted to write some things that would help the child feel better, or at least be heard. And the company was just like, no, she can't have heard that. It's like, change the subject. And she was so troubled by that. So I let her know when she came to work with us, well, I exactly want you to go there and deal with those subjects instead of avoiding them, because it's inevitable. It will happen. Imagine that someone goes and sees Frozen, and then they get a companion Elsa character. I swear to God, it's like the first day they're going to have an alone moment and go, how do I come out to my parents? It's going to happen, those kind of conversations. So I have some images here that I can show you. Mauricio Abril did these sketches for me from my rough. And I can show you these. I can't show you the real thing, but we actually did this for real. We did an interactive AI character. We used Dory. We did the screen where she showed appeared to be the glass in a portal in a submarine. So it made sense that you were looking at glass to see her swimming on the other side of it. And the team that was dealing with that first was avoiding sensitive subjects. And there was a big team dealing with language and all the different things that would have to do with the character hearing you and answering properly. And I wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines. And we were at the time dealing with branching possibilities. But at the beginning, the choice was bring up safe subjects. And I went and had a talk, and I told the Madame Mediocre story to the head of the department and to the person that was spearheading the event. And I said, why don't we instead go right to sensitive subjects and try to make that work and see what happens? I mean, this is an internal thing. It isn't out to the public yet. We're doing our own lab work here. So based on hearing about Madame Mediocre and Fernando, because she would use Fernando, like, what do you think, Fernando? And the tarantula would jump and people would scream, but they still would talk about important things. So anyway, they said yes. And they let me come in and shape content. And so there was another experience people were doing earlier that had to do with families, reuniting a family. And so I went, well, let's stay on that subject. So the first thing she would do is ask if you were involved with helping with this family be reunited, and then go to your family. Aren't families wonderful? And some people are going to go, no, or families are a problem, or families are a headache, or I wish families were wonderful, And so I just went, it's a natural fit. And sometimes it's going to be great. Sometimes it's going to be joyous. Sometimes it's going to be dicey. And so everybody took a deep breath and dove in. And so we had, and I'll go back to sharing here. So we actually had some content that if somebody answered that things were not going well with their family, she would really listen. She would show great empathy. And she would even come give you a little thin soul bump at the glass. And then I had a moment built in where I didn't linger there forever. I made sure that you were heard and that she responded and went to your emotional place and showed she cared with that kind of a moment. I had an automated thing happen then where other fish would swim by in the background, and they would say, hi, Dory. And she would turn and say hi to them, and they're very cheery. And as they leave, her little button on it was, they're family to me, and we're not even related. Sometimes you kind of have to make your own family. And then she would go move on to another subject. So at least it kind of tied a bow in a gentle way and reassured them that there's other ways to think of family beyond the traditional one. And it paid off well. And we also had a moment that people really seemed to connect with, where she could look into the room and see that you had shells there and different colors, and she'd ask you to hold up different ones, and she could sense what color it was. You were holding up a pink one or a lavender one or blue, and you could actually put it in a little chute, and it would go out through into the media. And so physical would become virtual, and she would hold it and thank you for giving it to her. And she was going to go give it to Nemo for his birthday party because she had forgotten to get a present. And so she thanks you and says, you'll always be family to me. So it played well. And people actually talked about having sort of in a good way, a few of them, like a tearful moment alone with Dory. We didn't pry, we didn't go into, and we made it so that there was some autonomy to the system, so it protected their privacy in those kind of moments. But we were amazed that nobody complained about it. They either hadn't gone that path, or if they had, they would talk about having a meaningful, tearful, productive moment alone with a character that was charming to them and felt for them. So we definitely felt like that was a step in the right direction. And of course, you need to bring in institutions that deal with studying human behavior and therapy and all that to do justice, because we can't assume to know what the best therapy routes are. But all of this leads me to now lessons from MIT. I was really inspired watching Cynthia Brazil's presentation in 2019. She, through her research, I was so glad because some of these things feel intuitively right, but her group had gathered the data. So she found we push transactional devices towards social interaction. We just do, like Siri and every other thing that's made for just transactional things to open an app or, you know, start a song or whatever. We try to push it towards those things. And I remember I was showing my dad my Siri app, and I one day asked her the meaning of life in front of him. And it never has happened again. But that one time, whoever wrote this most beautiful little paragraph about the meaning of life. And it was sweet, it was poetic, it was meaningful, there was no joke. And he looked at me amazed. And I was just like, yes, with that, it meant so much to me to have him look at my piece of technology and feel like it had resonance with our human experience. So, you know, I was pushing it towards that. Well, what she found was we all do that. We push them towards meaningful social interaction. Devices that achieve social interaction increase engagement. So that's a winning thing. Even if it's just a business model and you want to make money, guess what? If it will achieve more social interaction, people will feel more engaged with it, they'll buy it. Empathy in a companion ally emerges as central. And she was sort of apologizing to the group she was talking to at the conference, because I guess they felt like that was too subjective and not being objective scientists or whatever. But she said, I'm sorry, I just have to talk about it. Empathy in a companion ally is emerging as a central theme. Like, people want that, they need it. She showed tests that were done with a little girl and the AI character, which was a physical little robot character that had a soft, huggable sort of exterior on it, that showing empathy and actually acknowledging mistakes and asking for help increased the bonding that happened. So when the character would say, make a mistake, they're both trying to solve problems together. And when the AI character would make a mistake, it would admit it, it would ask for her help, she would help it. And Cynthia was just blown away. She had the test footage, and the little girl hugged it and she said, I believe in you. And it was just so like, you're going to do it. And she went, oh my God, what a moment that emerged once the character was showing that it needed help and asked for her help. And this was important to gesture and expression increases the communication and bonding. So she had pointed out that their little robot character could lean towards her when it was talking about things. It could lean away, it could lean toward the problem it was doing. So, you know, that moment of leaning toward her to ask for help and then having the girl reciprocate with a hug was something that she felt like behavior, not just the words being spoken, but behavior in the moment of the situation, which is what we talked about last time. As a spark of life, a core spark of life thing is behavior, not just the words that are typed into a system. It's behavior. So she saw proof that that was a thing. Also, she found that the presence of a companion ally increases human-to-human interaction. A lot of people think that, oh, you get obsessed with the virtual thing, therefore you ignore the humans around you. They found the opposite. They put like an AI companion into like a senior citizens home situation, and they would interact more in general with the AI character, the companion character, that would get them more animated with the character, take away the boredom that's going on. But then they would interact more and talk about the character and then talk about other things, and in general be more interactive with their fellow humans once they had this sort of instigator of, let's start doing things, let's start talking, here's a subject. So she found that it was not distracting from human connection. It kind of stirred up and caused more human connection. So I thought that was a wonderful thing. I just thought I'd mention this. I really am oriented, coming from starting out as a Disney feature animator and thinking about characters, AI characters from that standpoint. I think of AI as many individuals rather than one godlike entity. I know that there's discussion of AI recently. There was a discussion of AI waging battles. It's on NPR. They were talking about AI wars and putting AI in control of decision making with things like battles. AI is many different things. It can be that sort of big system thing, but myself and the teams I've worked with have never looked at that big umbrella, omniscient sort of presence as AI's natural territory at all. We've seen individual characters and many individual characters. So it's very interesting. This started outside of the Disney or character realm. It started with a person that was a very ambitious and forward-thinking physical trainer, and he wanted an AI version of himself to train for nutrition, and he had been a Mr. Universe, so he had really worked on his physique, and he was proud of that. He didn't want a cartoon version of himself. He wanted a photoreal version of himself. We also went and met with Magic Johnson's company, and they also, like the NBA players, wanted AI versions of themselves. So it was like photoreal, gorgeous. It's like, I don't want a cartoon of me. I'm proud of the me. Like, I work on my physique. I want people to see me. So he wanted a AI version of himself to go train more people than he could on his own. And so he wanted people to know it was not him, that it was AI, but it photoreal looked like him. It had his voice and it had all his teachings. He did not want it to Google search at all. So if you asked about advice for feeling strain in your back or something, he did not want us to activate Google search, bring in an answer. It's like only from his books that he had written. Well, and then he would customize the experience for each person. So instead of everyone sort of getting group training, it's like, you have a specific need. Your knee was feeling funny. He follows that up. Like, did you do the exercises I recommended, and how does your knee feel now? Is it making progress? If there's a problem, he would then come in himself and replace his AI thing, go, now it's the real me. We need to deal with this and work on a solution. But even doctors have told us that, 80% of their questions could be handled by an AI assistant. There's only about 20% where they really need to be in the room to solve it. But I looked at that model and just went, well, when I'm doing Winnie the Pooh or Jiminy Cricket, it's that same kind of thing where you're making a character it represents itself, not a system. It has a personality. It has a point of view. The way Dory sees the world is different from how any other character should see the world. Its sort of archive of answers it might give are definitely filtered through its worldview, and not just a big ubiquitous group data feeding answers in. It's very curated per individual character. And then also segmented into many experiences. So imagine you put Dory, and I'll show you a little bit more Dory work in a moment, but imagine you've given her to a kid, and the kid can bring her up wherever he or she wants, and they go on a Grand Canyon trip. And so they show Dory like, hey, there's no water here. Look, it's just rocks. It's like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? And so you're talking about history and how this all happened. So that particular Dory, AI Dory, should learn about the Grand Canyon from you. Someone else might have taken Dory to the zoo, and they're all talking about other animals that don't swim in the ocean, and she's amazed, and the kid helps teach Dory about that. Those two Dorys have different experiences now, paths that are building. The one from the zoo shouldn't like send its teaching over to the Grand Canyon one and suddenly be spouting all that stuff. It should be curated by what you did with your companion and your archive of memories building up. So you're segmenting many, many characters, and then all different paths of experience because of who they're friends with. And that being kept really, really respected as many paths. So that's a whole different way to think about the big controlling AI system that's sending rockets and making world decisions. It's like, no, these are very positive, carefully thought out companion characters. So it's a whole different philosophy driving that. And many people that I'm dealing with are also on that same path. And I thought I'd get into some of that. I did these sketches as part of a presentation where I was describing the goal of moving from being outside the world to inside the world. So I was saying, back when I used to animate, I would imagine a moment that people would meet my character and bond with it. So this kid is at the movie theater looking at my character, or these days looking at a mobile device streaming and seeing my character. But it all comes down to, looking through a screen into the world where the character is and bonding with them vicariously. So the whole goal is to stop doing it vicariously and instead to maybe walk into the 100-acre wood with Winnie the Pooh. You saw the Kiwi free walking robotic experiment where we had the baby brute as a first test case, but Yoda, Winnie the Pooh, a whole bunch of different characters could invite you into their world. So having a birthday party in the 100-acre wood physically, so you're not vicariously looking at a screen, you're in the world with the characters. So that's one of the dreams. Being in the swamp and having Yoda give you advice, strolling along with the Jedi Master. Also, then having the characters just step into your world wherever you are. This was a fun exercise. Again, I went from my own sketches to Mauricio's sketches here, but I took him through an exercise where I went, okay, Dory is the companion of Josie, and she and her mom are on a ship, and she's eating room service, and Dory is on the little mobile phone having her kelp while Josie eats her breakfast. So it's a little companionship moment. She's not really interfering. She's just being there, part of the family, and little yum-yums and stuff. But then the mom turns on the stateroom TV and sees an advertisement. Oh, there's this VR experience you can do on the ship where for, some people are out snorkeling, but for those who aren't comfortable being in the water, you can put on virtual goggles and imagine that you're swimming. And guess what? The point of view that we're going to feed into your goggles is from a real underwater drone. So you're going to see a real feed from that real ocean here under the ship. And so you can come experience that together. So Dory, from the mobile phone by the kid, gets excited by that, leaves her mobile phone, swims onto the smart TV and goes, hey, you guys should totally do this. If you go swimming with me, I can be your guide. I can take you around and show you all the cool stuff because I know this world. Believe me, this is my thing. So they just go, oh, that Dory, there's no stopping her. She just is a piece of work. So then they're getting ready and they're brushing their teeth, and the mirror, which is also media equipped, she swims over and goes, oh, I can't wait for you guys. Come on, I'm going to swim ahead. Catch up with me. I can't wait. And she swims off and they're like, oh, that Dory, you just can't stop her. Then they're walking along the concourse, the ship, and there's a giant media screen. People are more and more moving to these giant LED screens. But to be able to have it since there's Josie and her mom walking along. So Dory, while there's big entertainment happening for everybody else, hundreds of people are seeing this, where she's walking close to the screen, Dory swims up and goes, great, there you are. Come on, I'll swim with you. So she swims along as she walks next to her. Then they get to the place. The designers of the VR have smartly made them look like, snorkel gear. So they put on the gear and they're doing a swim together. And what they see and experience is actually the undersea, which is from the live drone. Their gestures actually do steer it. So if they go to back up, the drone underwater backs up. If they go to turn, it turns. So you actually are, by gesture, driving a real drone underwater. And Dory becomes your guide and is talking about what she sees and everything. So that's an example of her being in your world. And then later, they're at the store, they get a plush of Dory, and it has speaking capability, and it taps immediately into her whole history of relationship, knows that it's Josie, knows that they just had the snorkeling fun, and generates her own thing. Rosie, I'm sorry, not Josie. Rosie and Dory say, just keep swimming. Later, her mom is it takes her to the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. They see the big mammoth. And so, Rosie decides to show that to Dory. She's like, oh my goodness. So what is that? So the little girl then has an opportunity when they get home. She brings out the little plastic dinosaurs and is talking to her about the earlier eras, including all the way back to the dinosaurs. And she uses a cupcake to represent the meteor that came in and destroyed them. So of course, Dory now thinks later, it's like, yeah, dinosaurs, they're little plastic characters that fit on your bed, and they were destroyed by a cupcake. And so, she maybe doesn't quite get it, but it would encourage Rosie to explain it better. And then she encourages her to read to her at bedtime. So instead of being a distraction, it's like, I want you to read a book to me, maybe about the dinosaurs. So Rosie actually reads to her and she listens in, and maybe we'll help her if there's a word that's a little too difficult. And maybe she asks her, well, could you read the next paragraph? And they take turns. But it's definitely an encouraging learning, encouraging reading sort of presence. And then they go off to dreamland. And there's just another example of a way a character could appear to you. This is on the ships, the two of the biggest Disney ships. It's a show that I took to them. It was about, on my side, about 12 or 14 years in the making, but it finally found a home with Disney. You can draw whatever character you want. This is one that I did. It was nice. The Disney people I was working with said, oh, you've got to put another hidden A113 message to your classmates. You all went to Cal Arts and you were in that first class, the A113 class. It's kind of legendary. So I have a lot of those in my films and projects. And so every time Mickey holds up that little placemat with a character drawn in it, I did the example character with my stateroom listed as A113 on the ship. And so there's Mickey actually holding it up. That's the real place. And that's my little sketch on the placemat. But the point is that all these people, 700 people at a time, can draw whatever they want onto the placemats. And there's a real proof of authorship and a pride of authorship that they didn't choose from a menu of preordained things that other people drew. And I've seen so many things go that direction where it's like, here's a menu. Do you want A, B, or C? And it's like, here's pen and paper, draw something. Now, I did give a place to put the drawing in, but I don't know what you're going to draw, and everybody draws something completely their own. So believe me, the eccentricity of the individual shines at this moment, and people are proud of what they did. We then later render whatever you drew into footage. So here's and this really happens. You can go find videos of it on YouTube, but here is an example I did for them to get ready for what would happen on the ship. So these are your own drawings. So your character, whatever you draw, just goes from Mickey bringing it alive and marching it along with the magic a la Sorcerer's Apprentice, the way he did with the broomsticks, but now it's your drawings that he's bringing alive, and then takes them into the world of iconic characters. So your character participates. And it was funniest thing, Joe Len Cicero, dear friend of mine, I went to Cal Arts in that first year. He talked about taking people on the ship to do a show and tell, and he'd take different executives on to show them, and he would hand them the pen and paper, and they'd be like, oh, I can't draw. And it's like, it doesn't matter, just whatever you draw. And it's really hilarious that the more stick figure and simple, the more audiences cheer for the character, because like the little underdog character, like doing a tap dance with Mickey Mouse showdown, is just much more hilarious than a sophisticated drawing doing it. So, but he described them as being like kids, and they would feel so empowered once they would do it. They would take the risk, they would draw something, and then they would see it come alive and participate, and they just felt empowered. And I thought, well, that's a powerful thing. And then I envisioned something else too. It was the World of Imagination. They actually tasked me, if you can see this is way back in 2013, but the next thing I was hoping to do, and this became a huge endeavor, was to take drawings, characters that guests would draw. So again, you draw whatever you want, and bring a whole world to life. You invent where it is, what the rules of the world are, who the hero is, what the hero's pet, the villain, their biggest fear, all that stuff would be completely just audience invented, brought to life. And I did a little show and tell video here. The things I described in it were having improv people drive it in real time. The change I would make now is everything that you'll hear me attribute to improv actors would be attributed to AI systems now. So imagine that you could go onto the ship, draw your character, you see it come alive in the main show, and then when you leave, it goes with you. It's now in your mobile, on your computer. You've created it, you brought it to life, you're its parent, and it wants to be with you. And now it can go be your AI companion in the same way that we described the other characters. So let's just take a look at this. And again, anytime I talk about improvisation, think AI. And what I was originally describing here was a situation where after the audience members would draw it, it would be projected much larger than life size. So like 20 feet tall on the side of a room, talking to everybody would be typical for how it would exist. Here we go.
For the world of imagination, guests provide blank slate character creation with pen and paper, whatever they want. Actors provide blank slate character performance with their own voice and gestures through motion capture, whatever they want. A hidden assistant manipulates proportion, color, and such, guided by hints from the actor and input from the audience. For example, an actor might say, my head feels like it's suddenly getting so big. Why did I drink that magical potion? My head's getting huge. And the assistant, taking the hint, enlarges the character's head size. The assistant might make the character huge in the theater. A very tiny and a great big world, I know. They can even fly the characters around. Woohoo! Lots of fun. They can swap out parts if the story calls for it. Very interesting. Now the audience might decide that an entire scene should happen at sunset, or maybe even at night, and the assistant makes it so. And once the characters are glowing lines in a dark theater, they can be projected onto moving scrims that fly right out over the audience's head, 3D, without glasses. Thanks to the participation and imagination of the guests, the actors, and the assistant, true blank slate creation is possible, so that the characters' features and words, emotions, and actions, moment by moment, are completely unique. They've never happened this way before, and they'll never happen this way again. The world of imagination will truly be magical. And that's only accounting for characters. There's a whole world around these characters, and more layers of interactivity. Stay tuned for updates. Thank you.
So, imagine the fun of just drawing a character and having it come alive and then redrawing it or having it start with your voice and then going, well, I wish you had a more shy voice or bold voice or whatever, and you could shape it from there. But there's a project that I'm trying to sort of find some chemistry with. There's a group, it's called the Imaginary Friends Society, and it's a wonderful thing. It's for kids with cancer, and it has carefully thought out therapeutic short videos about dealing with all of the things that they go through while they're dealing with cancer treatment. And having their imaginary friends explain it to them seems to be a really strong connection for the kids. And, they've done videos that sort of seem to be wonderful imaginary characters, but the part that really grabbed my attention was the kids gallery, where the kids draw as the same way they did on the ship. They draw and then upload their own imaginary friends. It's amazing, the gallery they have and all the different things they've drawn and the names they've given them and the superpowers that they might attribute to them. So to me, to be able to go in and do the trick that we did for Disney with saying, you did a drawing and now your drawing, whatever you did, if it's crayon or Sharpie or pencil or whatever, that comes alive, to be able to have their characters deliver the messaging of the therapeutic help for their cancer treatment rather than a representation that somebody else did, I think would be a step up in a powerful connection. So was talking recently to some people at a lab about trying to get that to happen. I would also just point out that we've talked about these kind of characters, Winnie the Pooh and Yoda and all of that, but it could also be like photoreal Rey from Star Wars. So your companion ally could be any number of things. Which brings me to the culture of AI. It's a very important thing that authorship is required. It doesn't just evolve. It is not something that naturally just happens. AI is not inherently neutral or objective or wise. people sort of attribute decision making, or it decides or something. Believe me, there's recognition of patterns, there's machine learning, things like that, where it mimics things. But there's, the system designers force ethics and logic and reason and all of that stuff into systems. So we set the goals, we establish the parameters and define the tone of it. And when I mention the tone, for example, someone might question whether you're tilting something that they see as inherently neutral. It's not. But to say, well, if you're forcing it to tell empathetic stories or be an empathetic character, maybe somebody doesn't want that. Why don't you just keep it neutral? And maybe they want to teach it about, being a bully and all of that. Well, at Disney and Blue Sky and Pixar and different places, they haven't apologized for having a point of view to be positive and try to teach lessons that discourage negative behavior and distrust and violence, and to encourage empathy. And I think the designers of the systems should take responsibility and with pride try to put good vibes out into the world. So I would say embrace that, and then tackle the hard questions now so you don't have to stumble forward. And here's 3 of the big tough things to handle. Empathy, which I just mentioned, how we use our imagination to put ourselves in the shoes of someone else, to know how they're feeling, to have characters that encourage that is an important thing. Bigotry, my gosh, there was the Asian actress in Star Wars that got just deluged with hate email and just attacked, bullied in the immersive space. And I just think that the builders of AI companion characters the characters should not tolerate that. I think they should try to go through stages, try to coax and encourage people who engage in that to think differently, to give it up, to be more accepting. If they refuse and just engage in hate behavior, I would encourage people to make their characters boycott and just say, I don't condone that. I don't hang out with people like that. And I'm glad to give you your money back. You won't see me again unless you change your ways. I'm out. Drop the mic, gone, blank screen, but you get a refund, and just make it a point. It's like, we're not going to let you train a character to engage in bigotry. It's just not going to happen. But that's a brave step. You have to there's a lot of things of interpreting people's meaning when they're joking, when they're not, but it's tricky, but you got to deal with it. Otherwise you just have a bunch of little trainable things that can be horrible in the world. So let's build safety nets against that potential. We don't want bullies training armies of more powerful bullies to go out and cause havoc. And it doesn't have to, but if we don't act responsibly now, that absolutely will happen. Therapy is a third really big one that, as with the Madame Mediocre example, people will turn to companion characters for therapeutic discussions. It just will happen. Having a sympathetic voice, they will engage in this. And so to go, get advice and start to really deal with people who spend years studying this and establish best practices and everything, it would be great to roll them into these systems to really try to design it well. Because even though we mean well and we're storytellers, we don't know the best answers to give in a moment of crisis where someone in the middle of the night might say something that's really provocative that could indicate they're in a dangerous place. We have to have a companion character who they will talk to anyway. Even if we don't do any of this, they will talk to it. If you take responsibility to be the best help at that moment, to guide them towards where they can get true support, and keep them in a healthy place, and coax them to get the support they need. Just an important thing. So those are, 3 big issues to tackle. I just would point out new privacy expectations. When I was at the session at USC with Susie Kim and Arish Markazi about the Tron to the esports, the original game grid to this one, people came up and they were talking about privacy and security, and I challenged several of the people because they were just they were sort of acting like they wanted to make sure that there was a big firewall and nothing of their personal experience would be handed over to anyone in any case. And I said, okay, let me present this to you. The creepy versus magical challenge. A corporation remembering your kid's name is creepy. And they all go, yes, that is creepy. Then I went, an AI companion forgetting your kid's name is broken. You will throw it away. You will say, Disney or whatever company built a horrible thing. It keeps asking my daughter's name again and again. It never remembers. This is like, it's depressing her. This is a broken thing. So I think you actually want the companionship. I think you want, your expectation is that the corporation, when you think about the corporation, you're creeped out. When you think about Winnie the Pooh or Yoda, you went to see Yoda and maybe you had a VR experience with Yoda and there was a moment of personal training and learning. And then you go to the parks later and you see the free walking autonomous AI Yoda walking around in Star Wars land, and he recognizes you. And he says, you know, Eugene, you know, learning you are. And you go, oh, Yoda, you remembered me. And for him to pick up and know the thing you did, the mission you did in the VR space, like 3 months before, and he was there and he remembers it and thinks it's cool. And that's the dream, is to have that kind of constant connection. So it's like everybody that had gathered around agreed, like, yes, I do want that. And I said, well, right now I'm fighting lawyers who are telling me I can't detect anybody's gestures or their facial expressions or their tone of voice, any of the stuff that would inform the character how to relate to you, know how you're feeling, show behavior, like you're telling a sad story and it's like, oh, it can tell and it listens to you. Like that moment is special. But they're trying to block all of that and go, no, your character can't know any of this. It's like, well, then my character can't be a good companion at all. So since they admitted, like, yes, I do want it to remember my daughter's name. I don't want her to be disappointed every time she talks to Elsa. It's like, who are you again? It's like, no, I wanted to remember that they did something, they had an achievement. And she did something at school that, you know, she praised and that she remembers it. And a week later, it's like, man, that was so wonderful that you accomplished that. Now you can do this next thing. It's like the continuity of personal experience. It's like, yes, we want that. And I said, okay, security always is a must, but personal information and gestures, like to have a dance off and like, you know, you dance with a character and then it tries to mimic you and it throws in an extra move. And now you try to equal. It has to read your gestures. It has to see you. It has to see what you're doing. And when you're having conversations, it needs to see your expression, hear your tone of voice, all that readable stuff. So I encourage them to start having conversations with companies where they don't just say, we don't want you to know anything about us. It's like, for positive purposes of companion characters, where it's like, we choose to go into these worlds and I love this character and I want it to be my friend. It's like, I want you to enable everything possible to make it a more effective, meaningful, connected friend where I feel the bonding and it's undeniable bonding that happens in friendship, and you know, to make that as mature as possible. So, you know, don't just blanket say, I don't want you to know anything about me. It's like, what is the purpose? How is the security guaranteed? But it still might be a loop where it never goes back to the company knows any of that stuff, but there's a local archive where the character keeps, you know, a memory trail with you. So when you go to the physical Star Wars land and you walk into Yoda, who's physically walking around, he remembers the interaction that you had in a VR game at your home in goggles before, and continues that continuity. And maybe that's something that they never tap into, they never know, but the character does. So it's an interesting puzzle. I'm also been encouraging haptics that increase intimate connection. So I'll just mention tap versus thump and breath versus breeze. And a couple examples of that were, you know, I was dealing with a group where they had the Millennium Falcon fly over my head and I was in goggles and they they had fans to hit me with the breeze, and it was cool. But I said, and then, an earthquake or like a blast hits and you feel things shake. And so, the big storm and the blast is there. And I said, yeah, but, we're working towards characters and character interaction and being in that world with a character that you're having an experience with, that there's a whole set of haptics that to me would give people much more goosebumps than the big windstorm and the bump from a blast. And so imagine that Ray is your companion on a mission, and she's told you, watch out here and check the stormtroopers as they come in. I'll be back in a moment. So you're doing your thing, and then you feel a tap on your shoulder, just a little tap. You turn and it's her right there, and she goes, shh. And then she whispers to you, and you feel breath in your ear. And it's like, to me, that is the magic moment. It's like, oh my God. It's like the proximity. Because if VR is done well, you swear there's proximity. You feel the presence of things and beings. I almost sat on a couch once because I swore it was there, and they're like, no, there's no couch, don't sit down. And it just looked real. And they did a test over at Weaver, the group that did the Blue with the whale that you can meet on the deck of the ship a few years ago. They're designing a lot of beautiful stuff, but they did a test where they would bring a photoreal car out, and it would just slowly roll out of a garage, and 100% of people backed out of its way. Nobody let it impale through their legs, because we just have this thing where, with VR is done right, it's not a movie wrapped around you. You feel like you are in a different place. You're physically there, and you feel the presence of objects and beings. So to have a moment like that where you feel a tap of a finger and you turn and there's somebody there, shh, and they whisper and you feel the breath. I've done breath in the ear before, but it was from a monster. I would much rather have it be from somebody who's a companion character and inspirational like Ray. So let me dive back to my deck here. So yes, that would be an example of something Ray might do. So I'll hit on this only briefly. I see immersion and AI for entertainment as the Trojan horse for setting a new standard of global communication for all people, for all purposes. And sort of the dominoes for that are pretty simple. The performers, it's like, I think we will want a Meryl Streep level and many other people, but she's a good example to go to, of just absolute excellence in performance, because we are going to get used to VR. It is the way we experience the world anyway. It's the default setting for the world. We all, I've heard people describe, oh, it's so crazy. You look through your eyes, and everywhere you look, there's a world around you. It's like, guess what? It's humanity 101. I wake up that way every morning, and all of us do. So it's the default human condition. It's not weird. It's like the fact that we can replace ours with another is obviously spectacular, but your experience of it is just being in a world like you always are. So the novelty of that will wear off quickly. And now you want to know, like, is the story unfolding in front of me? Is the performance, whether it's companionship from our friends or the presentation of an actor in a story, you're going to want excellence. You're going to want Meryl Streep level performance that really makes you forget that you're in anything, pretend that you believe the moment is real. So you're going to want that not to have retargeting of her expressions to like some other thing. You're going to want to have the avatar of her in that virtual space absolutely respect her micro expressions and not try to put a cartoon over her, not try to put a mask over her, not to reinterpret, have somebody who learned rigging to go like, yeah, Meryl Streep did this expression, but I'm changing it. It's like, I don't want you to change it, as she has this magical gift of being a spectacular performer, and we can't quite know why it works. So just let her send her magic to us and don't change any of it, please. So your expectation is make her avatar photo real and driven by her down to the micro expression, so her excellence can continue to happen and won't be somehow kind of masked by being in this virtual space. You want it to be 100%. So that's where we're going to go with somebody who's a performer. You want to do the same thing with your friend who's watching this, who's experiencing this with you. If you look over, yes, I used an image from a movie, but I'm imagining this as a friend that you would turn to and go like, oh, I wonder if she's into it. And you want to see with as same accuracy that you saw Meryl Streep performing, you want to see the reaction. So you're looking like, oh yeah, she's got it, she's into it. Or Or somebody, oh, look, she feels moved. I can tell that she's feeling this. Or you might look at somebody and go, oh, this is too scary for them. I see that they're about to freak out. So you want the performance to be spectacularly nuanced and real. You want your friends, when you check with your friend who might be completely in a different state or different country, but you are together experiencing this now due to immersive tools. But you want to be able to look at them and not see a mask and not see a cartoony thing or retargeted thing. You want to, at that moment, go, oh, I see her. She's into it. She feels it. I see her really paying attention. So that allows us as co-experiencers of these stories, these adventures that we're going through, to make sure that we feel each other's presence and we feel connected in the experience. So now let's say that that's done. We went through something spectacular, and now afterwards we just want to sit and talk or maybe around a digital campfire, as we are now, but in a better way. But now those people aren't in the Star Wars experience or the whatever experience they were in, or Shakespeare or a drama or whatever it was. This is afterwards. And they're all in different parts of the world, but with immersive technology, the same fidelity that showed them the beautiful Meryl Streep performance and beautifully reflected their friend's reaction to it, so you can gauge them during this experience. Of course, you want to just continue. You don't want to turn that off. You want to continue to have it. So the discussion about what you just went through, you can talk about it and all of the subjects it brought up. So your after movie or after play, after experience chat can go well. And then guess what? Now you're finished talking about that, and just where are you going to school next year? And what's happening for Thanksgiving? Now you're just being with each other. So all the entertainment stuff that built technology, that's all gone away now, and you're just being with your companion humans. So what you snuck up on was just how communication works immersively for all of us through the guise of building an entertainment system. And now it works for all of us for anything we want to talk about. Imagine if the phone, when it was, before it was a smartphone, back when it was just a phone and a voice, imagine if it was burdened with all the artifice that people are trying to shove into immersive space and the visual part of me projecting into to you. At the beginning, if they'd said, well, what is your voice going to sound like that's not you? Because it can't be you. It has to be a monster or a fairy. And what game are you going to play while you're on this phone? It's like, no, I want you to kind of get out of my way. I want to be my voice, so when my mom answers the phone, she knows it's me. And I don't want you to change her voice. I can hear when she's excited or she has a cold or something's on her mind. I want to hear that accurately. And we were able to do that and easily forget any of the technology. We don't think about, I'm speaking to my mom, but my voice is shaking a little diaphragm inside and then it's being sent digitally to a satellite and it's being projected here and then it's going to her. No, you hear your mom, and we forget the technology's even in the loop. And if this is done well for the purpose first of fidelity in the experience we're going to see, which is entertainment, and then it just continues to connect us with that fidelity, it's just us communicating with other humans. So it's a wonderful thing. And I think I'll just go to a last image here where it's one of my concept sketches for a feature I'm working on. But I think ultimately we're all going for that moment where the technology allows us to comfort each other and be with each other despite the miles between us. And the killer app really is being together. And it's, if the philosophy is it's for positivity and a moment of reassurance and sort of the big hug across humanity, I think that philosophy will guide us toward a good thing. And I will end with this, since I represented entertainment and immersive and AI as the Trojan horse of changing global communication. You are here, either inside of that Trojan horse and you are helping design it as a positive, wonderful thing, or you are here outside of it and you're letting somebody else design it for whatever purposes, and it could be absolutely awful. So I would invite you to get inside and help build it for good, because it can be spectacular. And that's my chat for today. And I would gladly open it up now to just any of you who want to talk, share, muse, etc.
That was amazing, by the way. Thank you. That was amazing.
That was really cool.
Thank you so much. Tina, when we talked about this, there's so many things that we could go into, and thanks for helping me curate the bazillion things on my mind into sort of bite-sized shapes. So we could do that. And next discussion, which hopefully won't be a month away, it'll be 2 weeks away, is expand reality, don't escape reality. So that will be our next thing.
Awesome. I think Zachary had a comment or.
Okay.
I had a question. Do you know that on the cruise, the animated draw your own animation, would it ever be possible to sample the person's voice so that the character even had their voice?
I definitely want to do that, and I actually
if they said like enough sounds or something. If they just recorded like a sentence that had all the phonetics that it would take or something like that.
There's different trainings that one of the things I did just before the COVID hit was I actually trained an AI character voice. So for our purposes, for it to be really emotive, I had to do hundreds and hundreds of lines. But they're getting better. And that thing that kind of surprised Microsoft is at first, since we were stretching for way more emotional expression than they'd ever done with characters before, and they would send back sort of panic notes like, tell Jerry to please not be quite so emotive when he does that next line. It's like, can he do a little more neutral? But they found out that even when I was being more expressive as this character, I wasn't doing my own voice, but I was putting on a character voice. But they found that with a smaller data sample than they expected, they were starting to show good results with even very expressive characters who had attitude. So that what they learned was more attitude and less data sample still was bearing fruit in a good way. So I hope it will get a smaller and smaller sample set till what you're talking about could really happen. And I know there's strides happening all the time towards that. But yes, ideally you'd want that, Zachary, is to be able to draw it and either you train the voice, or you might even do a thing where it sneaks up on you and asks you some things about the character. So you're just describing to it, well, I want it to be this kind of and it's like tricking you by sampling your voice, and it doesn't even ask you what it wanted to sound like. And then the first time it just talks in your voice, and you can either go, that's fun, I like that, or you go like, no, I want it to be more bass or more tenor, or
right.
I want it to be British or Aussie.
I was just assuming that when the people were drawing, they were like majority of the time drawing themselves in the boxes. Like,
I never saw that happen. I've seen lots of videos, really? and I always saw them just drawing some kind of fanciful thing.
You don't think it was some abstraction of their personality or something?
I'm sure it had something to do with their inner self, but I never saw them try to do a self-portrait sort of thing. Yeah. I think it would be great. I heard that there was a sort of subculture of people, though, who were trying to grab the placemats before they went in, and then take the time to do really intricate drawings that they'd take hours, and then like take it into the restaurant and go, I already have mine drawn, just scan this. But there's so many possibilities. I maybe in our next session I could show you. I did a dance-off thing. I just called it dance-off, where I took one piece of animation dancing, and I kept swapping out people's drawings, and it was just so fun to see the surprises that would come along. But it'd be like a flower dancing, or an eyeball with tendril legs, and a Frankenstein, or a robot, or a little doll, and then just like very squiggly generic human, but with carefully done like plaid shirt or something, and sometimes unfinished, where you would have like just eyes but no head around it, and then like just hands but no arms, and it would work perfectly. It's like it would look very mesmerizing, because it would be like invisible arms, but it's connected, so you'd feel the presence of the connection even without seeing the drawing. So it's quite a fun thing. But now taking it into you being able to train it, and I just talked to someone over at Rutgers lab about trying to do a project where we would take that idea of you do the drawings, you bring it to life, but then to have people know there was part of Cynthia's thing of M.I.T. she showed like a 10-year-old boy that was happily training a computer. Like he was, they typically will hire people. There's a whole culture of this where people volunteer to go in and they get a few pennies per transaction, but they go through helping it recognize words, helping it like typical answers that somebody might give, helping it recognize, is this a cat or a dog, or where's the surfboard? So if you could know, and this kid was like, yeah, I'm training the computer, I'm training AI to be smarter, and I'm proud of it. So they didn't have to hide it from the kid. The kid was like, no, I'm helping it, I'm helping AI grow up. So I thought it'd be fun to have you draw your character, have it come alive, and have with full knowledge that you are helping a lab increase how well AI works and how aware it is in the world, and all different aspects, and with its intelligence and its an emotional ability to express and all that good stuff, to go through training exercises where you actually do improve it, and you send the data to the university who uses that mass data to actually improve things. So you would know you're giving birth to a character that's helping AI grow up, and so it's your baby in a very tangible way.
Very cool.
There was something in the chat, and you answered my question too. I'll just bring it up again.
Okay.
I saw a video in regards to AI characters having memories, and the privacy issue of that. I saw a video of a child at the park whose parents said, "Oh, look, there's Minnie Mouse or Mickey Mouse." And it was just stunning, the reaction of the little kid just running at the guy in the park, in the suit, and big hug. And I'm wondering about memories. And somebody, I think Jonathan said, well, can't people be asked and be given permission to have their faces recognized, so these characters could remember them? And imagine that little girl, if it was the second time seeing, right? And the remembered her.
Yes, in fact, there was a moment that had to be kind of manufactured, but it's a perfect example for it's a support for AI having the capability to do this as it goes out into the world, and not just as it exists in a park. But there was a moment that was talked about amongst the Disney employees for a long time. It was still being talked about because it was so powerful. It was a Crush experience, and there's a live performer behind the scenes. And I don't know how many of you have seen that, but it's a preordained animated cycles, but it's really well done. It looks very much like Crush should look from the Finding Nemo story. So he's swimming and he's sort of full sea turtle size on a screen, and people go up to talk to him, and he talks to you, and they give a microphone to the people in the audience. So there's a live performer driving it and choosing gestures that it would do, and live driving the mouth. And so this mom came there with the little boy, and it was his birthday, and he had just loved Crush on their previous visit. So she went to the Disney employees and said, please, could you, it'd be great if Crush recognized him. Right. It would just be a dream. So she goes, here's his name, but the nickname that he goes by is this. And last time the Crush asked for his nickname and learned it. So if he could recognize him and call him by his nickname today, that would just be the best birthday present. Right. So they did that, and the kid just was in heaven. Oh my God, it's like Crush remembered me, and it was just the sweetest thing. Now the mom had to go sort of clandestine, like make that moment happen. But just to know that it's built in, that sort of joyous reunion, and knowing the third or fourth time, or maybe you met the character in a VR environment and spent a half hour with it doing on a mission, and then the next time it would remember, oh, we did this together, and you helped me get through this adventure, and I was afraid, but you helped me be brave. And so to have it remember those experiences you've done. And then another thing that's just would be amazing, and for people who, I think some people are afraid that a lot of this autonomous systems will rob writers and animators and directors and performers of some of their work, but there's such a volume that needs to be done. And here's just one example: is imagine you've had that moment where it's several months between, but a character remembers you and what you did. Now it shouldn't just be waiting for you to talk to it. It should have been busy with its own life. So for you as writer, experience builders to have written like, what has it been up to for the last 3 months when you didn't see it? When it's like, it's been the middle of that and it tells you about, oh, I've been doing this and this, and I met so-and-so and I went on this journey. And, and to even be able to say, maybe there are like 10,000 of a character that are out there that are, you know, different people are dealing with, they're building different bonding relationships with it. But when it's away time, stories are the same. Like everybody's learning when it's not with you, it cohesively in its world experience is doing this other thing. So you could start building towards an upcoming movie, like a plot line, things that everybody gets interested in because they all hear their character whenever it talks, oh, what have you been doing since I saw you last? And they bring up or show you things that are hinting at some bigger thing. And then you could proactively throw to everyone more of an event where the character, maybe some other character invades for a moment and then is sort of chased out by the character and says, who was that? Did you see that? And it's an important villain that's going to show up in the film. And when you go see the film, you're like, I saw that, you know. So there's ways to be active as storytellers and writers and designers of experience where, you know, automation isn't going to do that. You're still very much using your own authorship to come up with beautiful, meaningful things for the character and world building things. And then you're building a bigger tapestry than just, here's a half hour, or here's 90 minutes, or here's a gameplay. You're trying to build the bigger view of what happens all the other times. So I think there's a lot of really creative work to be done.
Amazing. It's like a dance. It's like who's leading who, right?
Right. And you try to make it seamless.
Does anybody have any other? Oh, somebody, Landon.
Yeah, Landon.
Yeah, I remember hearing that during the production of The Brave Little Toaster, you had—
I was there.
Yeah, you had gone to Taiwan to enlist a bunch of other animators that were helping out on that. I presume the language barrier must have been a tricky thing to deal with.
Yeah, I always had 3 interpreters every day. So it was, you know, there were about a dozen of us that lived there for 6 months straight. And we always had our team of interpreters, and they were just wonderful. The interpreters and everybody else was just wonderful people. And so we all had a sort of a good time dealing with the challenges of understanding language. But boy, the universal language of the storytelling and the emotion just really sort of ruled the day. But yeah, it was tricky because you could say the difference between ni hao ma or ni hao ma was like, how are you, or how's your horse? So we would say something thinking that we were being conversational and get a bunch of giggles back and then go, what did I just say? And it's like, well, here's what you said. The squid is arriving in September. I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to say that. So, but yeah, it was great. It ultimately led to a lot of bonding because we were always grappling with it.
Amazing. How did you, Jerry, find a passion for this particular medium? What led you to the spark of life and breathing it into these artificial characters? Did it start with animation, or I mean?
I think it's the first place I got to sort of put it into practice. But I kept seeing a value to it, and we would learn what makes the spark of life happen by observing life around us and emotion and behavior from our own lives and our own friends and family and people we'd meet. So to me, it was always an exercise that made me more connected with emotions, more connected with people, because if you shut yourself off from all of that, you can't make your character express very well. You have to be a good observer and like soak that stuff up. So it made me very mindful of looking outward and observing and noticing. And I think just that always helps us, that empathy, being able to imagine, it's, and I could maybe go through imagination next time too. There's an exercise that's fun that proves every single person, whether they realize it or not, are absolutely using imagination all the time.
Right.
But one of the key forms of imagination is empathy, being able to imagine what someone else is going through, what it's like to be in their shoes. And I found myself constantly doing that in order to be an animator. You're always, I had some people even say that about Toaster, where I had so many people describe it to Deanna Oliver and I, who did the voice of Toaster. We did a Q&A at Cal State Northridge, and a number of the students asked us like how we made such a dark film and sort of why we chose that. And I told them I never thought of it as a dark film. I just wasn't making light of their situation when they're sinking in quicksand, and Toaster is screaming at Blanky to untie itself and save itself, and she's desperate. And Blanky says, I'm not scared, but his voice shakes because he's really terrified. He's just trying to make her feel not as bad when they die. I just thought that's what they're going through. That's, putting myself in their place, feeling the empathy. It's like, that's what it would be going through. Like, I don't want to joke about that. I don't want to make it less. I want to have you feel what they're going through. And so when they're rescued, you feel the relief of that. But I didn't want to belittle it or wink at the audience. So I just found myself always, whatever project I was working on, drawn into that exercise of empathy for others. And then just started noticing that was so common to a lot of different performers and storytellers and writers, and that there's a connection that we feel with each other that is strengthened by virtue of how we have the characters express. So many people, that was like my favorite moment in an otherwise quite failed movie by one of Spielberg's duds was 1941. But there's a great scene in 1941 where there's a general alone in a theater watching Dumbo, and he's like, there's the part where Baby Mine is playing and the Dumbo's in the mother's trunk, and he's crying alone in the theater. I went, yeah, that's the general is crying at Dumbo. That's just a sweet, the power of the medium. And then I just kept seeing more and more. I would see I did pitch deck, which I could show you next time. I could just take you quickly through. It was in 2007, 2008. I did a pitch deck for immersive communication. So it's game technology grown up for real purposes. And when I showed it to different people, they all wanted it, and they all wanted it for different things. So my son, when I showed it to him, the power of immersive space way back then, he was like, oh, I want it. Because I in music practice, we met this girl. She's a great drummer at band camp, and she lives in another state, but we could still practice together if we could hook up an immersive space, and we could still have band practice, and we could just ignore the distance between us and have our music continue. So it's like, to him, it was a way to keep the band together. My younger son was, back then, I think he was playing like Gears of War with friends, but it was still totally social. I'd see him come home from school, do his homework, he's good with that, but then like jump online, and instead of him being alone or separate, he was back like joking with all his buddies that were at school. They had all finished their homework, and now they're like jousting with each other and laughing and having a good time and talking about the mission plus just other stuff. And he's like, oh, I would totally want to use this space, and please, I want to look like me, and I want Tyler to look like Tyler. I don't want to have to use like Phoenix and the different characters that they invented for us. I want to see Tyler, but I want him to wear all the Gears of War stuff. So I want to be in that world with all the gear, but I want to see each other. So please do that. And then I pitched it to my wife, and she said, and she had a lot of the perspective on this too, because she came from Art Center into Disney, and we met there, and so she lives in that world too. And she just said, oh my God, I would use it because it's so hard to get together with moms of boys in school. And she said, oh, that's a thing, mothers of boys in school. And it's like, we have different conversations than mothers of girls in school, and it's so hard to find time to get to the coffee shop. And she goes, oh, if I could just, wherever I am, plug in and we could be sitting together and be in our favorite garden or in a fantasy place or whatever. And just, if we have 20 minutes, all 20 minutes is just spent suddenly being together instead of having to get in the car and drive and find a parking space. And so she goes, that would be mine. And my mom was just entering her 80s at the time. And I showed it to her, and she, I had bought her the first Mac when it was the little gray box, and she wrote her memoir on various Macs. And so she had some computer knowledge, and she immediately said, oh, wait a minute. So I could look at my computer screen and use it as my point of view and go to the market, and I could go up and down the aisles and look at it. She goes, it's hard for me to walk now. But she goes, instead of looking at a screen and like poking at, here's a picture of grapefruit or something, I would like to move point of view through the market and see. So could I talk to the person that's helping and, say, how are the watermelons? Are they ripe? And I said, yeah, you could do that where you could see each other and she goes, oh, I would totally use it. So, everybody wanted it for different things. And, I only had one of those people that wanted it for explode things and make points, but he wanted to see his friend there. He didn't want to see the make-believe character. So I started to see that this thing that started with empowering people to go into our fantasy worlds, which, by the way, as soon as I was involved with not only the films, but the parks, we were dealing with VR. I mean, Walt was dealing with VR back when he first built Disneyland. It's like, I made the movie Peter Pan. You can now come with your family and physically climb into the boat and fly over London. So you can go inside my movie world. So, Walt was doing VR, physical VR, totally immersive space from way back then. So I felt like all of this was part of the same storytelling palette that already existed in the parks. It's like, you're just making a way for me to jump into that world from my home too, which is great. And so I just felt like there was a cohesive way to continue this core thing of being together, shared experience, and having empathy for others be a big driver of why you even want to be in that immersive space. And so it just continued. And I would just get so frustrated to see the tools there and to not be used. And I remember going into Image Metrics back when they were just, and it's a company that was doing avatars early on, and they had good bragging rights about performance-driven avatar movement, so that like you could live drive a character pretty effectively even back then. But they were just starting with their Benjamin Button work, and I went in to talk to them, and they said, and it was going to be about a day in the life of an immersive world, and they said, well, just so you know, we know the guy that invented Second Life. It's like he's a friend of ours, and he's come in and done presentation. So we already know this territory, but go ahead with your presentation, but just, we know it. So I went through, and I had a few images. I had maybe a dozen images that were printed back in the day. And I told them the story of what it would be like to be in this space for real purposes. Anyway, at the end of it, they went, oh my God, this is like tectonic plates shifting on the earth. This is not anything like Second Life. And it started me on this thing, which I'll talk about next week. You either use it to escape reality or to expand reality. And my whole thing was expand reality, same tools, different purpose. The trip to Dubai saying build Infinity City was a way to totally expand reality. And it was so frustrating. I'd go into, an Image Metrics, bless their hearts, they're like, you can come in here and be an avatar, and you can, what we have that you'll love, you can come in and not be you. You can be a giant. You can be a fairy. And I would like, well, how about if I'm me? They're like, oh, we never thought of that. It's like, well, I think a lot of people would want to be themselves. A selfie is called a selfie for a reason. It's not an othery. It's like selfie. So I think the more people go, yeah, that's me you're looking at. And now with NFTs invented, it's like the NFT of me, I'm provably me. And I saw another test that came out of I just happened to stumble across it. I think it was at USC. but I looked at a whole video from the professor who had gone through a test, and his test was, if I make an avatar of you, and they found a way to do it pretty quickly, and it was, you could recognize the person. It wasn't a beautifully done, articulate expression avatar, but it was wrapped a photo around reasonably well. And so you could recognize anybody you'd see on the street and go, oh yeah, that's you, that's the avatar of you. There was no mistaking. So they said, once you have yourself in the game, will you be more careful with how it goes through the experience? Will you make sure it gets exploded less? Will you take more care of it if it's you in the game? And so that's what they thought they were going to discover. They discovered no changeable data at all in that regard. It's like, didn't matter. People would play the game the same way. But they noticed something they weren't expecting. They said people were way more interested and engaged with the game when it was themselves. So I would go to them and go, well, look, I've been trying to get this for a long time. Now this guy inadvertently stumbled across the data that proves that if it's you instead of a fantasy overlay, you will be more interested. They measured, it's like many points more of engagement, of wanting to play it again, spending more time with it. Like, talk about a good investment. If you spend X amount of money on a game and you either have less engagement and less time spent with it, or same price tag, more engagement, more time spent with it, more talking about it, more word of mouth, more support, more purchases, like, why wouldn't you do that? So, but I kept encountering, even after that, it's like, you cannot be you, and you can pretend to be someone else, and you can escape reality instead of expanding it, and have time to kill instead of spending time well. And I'm just like, okay, we've done that. It's time to move to I am me and you are you. And yes, we can do a masquerade party and agree to suddenly step into a space where we're going to be total fantasy and nobody knows anything because we want to have a masquerade party. But that's a choice in a much bigger world where anything can happen. And a lot of it is very useful for communication and education. And if it's done right, you could meet each other in an immersive space, feel tangible presence, and get to know one and start dating in that space, and then go meet them in physical real life and feel absolute continuity, not feel shock at all. Because, you know, when you stop putting on the pretend mask, when you're authentically you, people are getting to know you.
Incredible. Anything to expand the human experience instead of contracting it or taking away, you know?
Yeah, I think this thing of too much screen time is
Right.
a false notion. I think it's like, what are you doing with the screen time?
Yeah.
Like now, is this too much screen time? I wish it was more immersive screen and we could
Yeah.
actually be sitting, feeling each other's presence together. But I think it's, you know, what are you doing with the tech instead of there's too much tech. Next time I'm going to be going into some examples of tangible ways to expand reality instead of escape reality. So it'd be some visuals, more storytelling, and we'll just sort of see where that takes us. But you know, anything that grew out of this, I might just ask you next time, like I did in this session, to start with, if you had any observations or further comments or questions or things to throw in based on what we talked about today. There's various stories. I think part of the magic is one of the stories, and
Nice.
so I'll take you into some examples of how you could just have a lot of fun with blended reality. And I think people wrestle a little bit with what does it mean to have blended reality and not just mean only putting on goggles. And so we can deal with tangible ways that AR and VR and projection and AI and all different kind of things can really merge into useful things that will be more and more sort of invisible, and just the power of what they can accomplish will enable you to just have the killer app, which is erase the distance between us. And there you go.
Incredible. Somebody asked, and we can put it in the resource list, if there's any books available with blended reality.
I don't really know. It's something that I'm talking about, talked about for quite some time. I can get into examples of it. I don't think there's really, I mean, people who talk about the metaverse, I think are generally talking about the same thing. People have different attitudes about sort of why and how it should happen. So, we'll get into some, but it generally is a metaverse conversation. So,
Wonderful.
and here's Rebecca. Hey, Beck. Wave to the class.
Thank you, Jerry. This has been absolutely incredible. Yeah, talk about mind shifting. What a great way to start the day, everybody. Thank you so much, Jerry. And thank you, everyone, for sharing time with us at the Digital Campfire.
Yes, thanks for coming, everyone. See you next time.